Most parents walk into their first IEP meeting already feeling like they failed a test they didn't even know they were taking. You're staring at paperwork that you definitely don't understand. People are using acronyms that you've never heard of. And somehow you're supposed to know what to ask for and how to say it the right way. I still remember sitting in my very first IEP meeting thinking, everyone here knows the script except me. I nodded along, I signed what they handed me, and then I went home and realized that I had no idea what I just signed for my child's actual day at school. Now, if that sounds familiar, there is a reason it feels so hard, and it's not because you're unprepared or incapable. The IEP process, it wasn't built to make things easy, and it especially wasn't built with autistic and otherwise neurodivergent parents in mind. And if we haven't met before, hi, I'm Alicia Trotwine. I am an autistic mom of four children, three who are also autistic. And around here, we talk about everything autism and the systems that we live within. So you're talking from schools to diagnosis to parenting to navigating life as an autistic adult. Now, I am an autism advocate, a speaker, and a writer. And everything that I share here comes from personal experience and conversations that I've had with families just like yours. So if you're ready for practical, easy to understand help along your autism journey, you're in the right place. What I wish someone would have done for me before my first IEP meeting is just to walk me through how the school is actually thinking, which parts of the document matter most in real life, and a few just key phrases that can shift the tone in the room, and honestly, how to advocate without getting stuck with the difficult label. Now, by time we are done with this video, you're going to have a couple concrete things that you can do before your very next meeting, even if your capacity is low. Here is the first thing that no one told me. Everyone in that room isn't actually trying to solve the same problem. See, you're there for your child's actual life, their education, their day-to-day lives, right? You're there thinking about their nervous system, their safety, and whether they can get through a school day without falling apart and then collapsing when they get home. However, the school, they walk into that same room with a very different set of pressures. See, they're juggling legal requirements, test scores, staffing, time, and constant pressure to keep classrooms running smoothly and looking manageable. Sometimes administrators are worried about complying with timelines. To teachers, they're worried about having 30 kids in a room and only so many adults to help. Case managers, well, they're trying to fit service into tiny blocks in a schedule that is already pretty packed. Now, this doesn't make anyone at that table a bad person, but it does mean that they are often thinking, how do we keep this system moving? While you're sitting there thinking, how do we keep my child okay? Now, once you see that difference, a lot of the strange parts of IEP meetings, they start to feel less random. The rushed agenda, the we've always done it this way, even the obsession with schedules and forms instead of what your child's body is telling you when they get home, it all starts to make much more sense. See, the school and you are not there for the same job. Their job is to keep their system moving. And yours is to make sure your child can get through the school day and still have something left of themselves by the time that they get home. So here's what I wished I could have had. So here are my wishes for what I would have known. Wish one, know your child's story. Before you ever sit down in that meeting, you need your own record of what's actually happening with your child. Your notes on what you're seeing, what you're asking for, and what happens after. What you need is to start by writing down the accommodations and supports that you're actually seeking for your child and be very specific. So if you are wanting reduced homework, movement breaks, or for them to be pulled from assemblies that are overwhelming, write that down. And this part, it's not about using the right jargon, but about being clear so that you don't get talked out of what you came into that meeting for. Then write down what your child is genuinely like on a good day, not a they math through it and they crashed at home day, a day where they came home and had some energy left. Maybe they actually wanted to talk about something that happened at school or had enough energy in their tank to play for a while before bedtime. What did that day look like? What was different? What time did they wake up? Which classes were easier? And what supports were in place? Then Write down what a rough day looks like. How were they when they came home? What were their emotions, their mood? What did that afternoon or the evening look like for you at home? Was there a meltdown, a shutdown, refusals, headaches, stomach aches, or even bedtime anxiety? Were they able to do homework or play with their friends? You see, this is a data that shows exactly how the school day is affecting them even when they're masking. And here's where the magic is. When you bring that kind of documentation into an IEP meeting, there's quite a few things that happen. For one, you're not stuck trying to remember everything on the spot when your emotions are high and you are completely overwhelmed. You also have a record right in front of you that you can keep coming back to even when the conversation drifts. And you have concrete examples that you can point to when someone says, well, we're not seeing that at school, or, well, they seem fine here. And here's the thing, you don't have to read it like a speech. And you don't have to ask for that exact document to be attached to an IEP if that doesn't feel useful to you. You can simply say, I've been tracking what things look like at home, and here's what we're seeing on good days and on bad days. And then pull from your notes as you talk through the plan. My second wish was knowing the basic IEP mechanics. The next thing that I wish had happened was for someone to just sit me down and say, here's the basic layout of an IEP. Instead, I was trying to figure it out all as I went, and I constantly felt like I was failing. Now, when you first open an IEP, the very first section is usually your child's present levels. Now, this is the school's description of your child's current skills and challenges. For example, your child might have meltdowns after school 3 days a week, but the present levels page just says sometimes appears anxious in class. Now, on paper, your child looks fine, but your notes from home tell a completely different story. After that, you'll see the goals. Now, those are the things that the team says that your child is supposed to be working on over the next year. Now, you might see a goal, will sit quietly for the whole group lesson. And it sounds reasonable until you remember that sitting still that long is exactly what sends your child into that shutdown at home by 4 p.m. That's the gap between what looks good in a document and what your child's nervous system can actually handle. After that, the accommodations and modifications are listed. Now, this is where they write down any changes to how things are taught, or how information is given, or how your child is allowed to show what they've learned. Following that will be the services, which is the actual support time that they're offering, things like speech, OT, or specialized instruction inside and outside the classroom. And look, you don't need to memorize every acronym in that document. What matters is knowing where to spend your energy. So, presence levels, those matter because they shape everything else. If that section makes your child sound fine or they're just a little anxious, it becomes so much harder to justify the real support that they need. And goals, they also matter because they tell you what the school thinks that success looks like for your child. And this is the section that you should take some time in. Read each goal and ask yourself, is this about making my kid look more typical, or is this about helping them learn in a way that actually fits their brain? The next thing you'll want to keep a focus on is that accommodation, modifications, and services, because they matter simply because that's the part that changes your child's actual days. It's what they will and won't get inside the classroom. And if your capacity is low and you cannot track everything, focus on those pieces first: your present levels, your goals, and then the supports and services section. In your next meeting, you can ask something like, I want to make sure that the present levels and goals actually match who my child is and what they need day to day. And then use those notes from earlier to back that up. Now, here is my third wish: to slow everything down and use language that actually helps. You don't have to move at the meeting's pace, and you're allowed to ask for things in plain language. Most IEP meetings, they move at a speed that works for the school, not a pace that works for you or your child. So the agenda is moving along, the acronyms pile up, and they are ready to move on before you've even finished processing what they've said. So instead of nodding along, you can slow things down and use a few key phrases to keep the focus on your child. A prime example of this is if you don't understand something or you didn't quite process it the first time it was said, you can ask them to explain it differently or to repeat it. You can do this with phrases like, can you say that again in a different way? Or can you explain what that would actually look like in my child's day? Doing this pulls those ideas out of the jargon that they use and into the reality of what your language is. Now, you can also ask, what data are you using to decide that? So the team has to show their reasoning instead of just stating opinions as if it's fact. Or what would need to be true for this support to actually work? To make them think about how it will work in practice, not just on paper. And if you are feeling overwhelmed or you need a few minutes to regulate, you can absolutely ask for a short break as well. Say something like, I'm having a hard time processing all this at once. Can we slow down on this section? Or I'm not comfortable agreeing to that right now. I need time to think. Now, your IEP team might act like everything has to be decided today, but you don't have to agree to every change in that moment. Saying something like, I need to slow down, is you refusing to be put through a plan that you haven't had time to think about. That you can stop, ask questions, and decide later. If the team keeps pushing you to move on or to get a yes, you can say, I'm not willing to agree to this as written. I want time to think about this and send you my concerns in writing or schedule another meeting to go over the changes. Now, it might feel uncomfortable to do this, but you are absolutely allowed to do this. Wish number 4 is advocate without being difficult. Now, so many parents, especially autistic or otherwise neurodivergent parents, are terrified of being labeled as that parent. They're afraid of being the one who asks too many questions. So, one that pushes back or the one whose emails people roll their eyes at behind the scenes. And here's the thing, the system benefits from that fear. When you choose to stay silent, to be quiet, to avoid that label, it becomes so much easier for the team to move forward with whatever is most convenient for the school, not what's best for your child. And while no one says to me, I want to say it to you. Advocating for your child is your job. And it doesn't make you a problem parent. You can disagree with part of the plan, ask for more explanation, request another meeting, and bring an advocate or support person with you. That doesn't make you difficult. That makes you a great parent. Now, another key piece of information here, just staying as calm as you can. Even if your first instinct is to get loud or angry, because sometimes things are going to frustrate you. Now, advocacy can sound like, this doesn't feel right for my child, or we need to think about how this affects their nervous system, not just their test scores. Once you see advocacy that way, it becomes a lot easier to ask, what can I actually do before my next meeting to be ready for this? If you've already had a rough IEP experience or you're starting your first one now, everything I just said can feel like so much to take in. So let's circle back to just 2 concrete things that you can do before your very next meeting, even if your capacity is low. The first thing to do is to start documenting. Write down what your child is like when they come home from a genuinely good day and what it looks like when things aren't going well, and what specific accommodations or changes that you believe would help bridge the gap between the two. Now, this doesn't have to be a full dissertation. Notes in your phone or a small notebook work just the same and are perfectly fine. The point is that when you sit at that next meeting, you have your own data in front of you that you can easily access when everything starts moving so fast. And the second one is to decide how you're going to slow things down if you need to. Now, that might look like planning to say something like, I need a minute to think about that, or I'm not ready to agree to this yet. Can we stay on this part just a little bit longer? Now, you don't have to have the perfect sentence ready. You just need to decide ahead of time that you're going to pause the conversation instead of getting pushed into yes.